Thanks very much for the introduction, and great to be here. It's my third Oil and Gas Denmark conference, and to be honest, so on the one hand, I'm really proud and flattered to be standing here, but I'm also a little bit nervous, to be honest, as well, because it's actually so much easier from down there at the tables, and it's quite a sight, actually, all the faces facing this way. So what do I want to talk about today? Absolutely, it's about working together and in partnership. But I'll be talking probably more about challenges than about solutions that we have. So I haven't got any silver bullet answers for you. So taking the intent of injury-free or goal zero and really turning that into reality on the ground is the huge challenge that we face. And with 95,000 staff and 400,000 plus contractors just in the shell-operated business, that challenge is huge, and it's certainly not one that we're going to achieve on our own. And hopefully, the insights that I'll share from my career will also help give you some inspiration as you go forward in your work. Okay, so I missed the disclaimer, which is okay, because normally there's a disclaimer slide, which is really busy. It just says, don't buy or sell shares based on anything I say today. Not that I really thought you would. So Alan Palm showed the integral model, and there's something about the top left box. So what I thought I'd do is just start with a little bit of insight as to what has shaped me and my beliefs on safety and environment. So a long time ago, I'm actually going to quote years, I was 17 in 1986, and I thought I'm going to study physics, and I'm going to do nuclear fusion and save the world's environmental problem of CO2. That was my dream. Now, a couple of years into the study, I realized quite how far away that dream was, so I switched to thermodynamics, which is everybody loves, and I became a process engineer in the oil and gas industry. But as a process engineer, you do actually quite a lot of work on environmental improvement, and it made me really proud. I could talk my friends, I passed the pub test on the kind of stuff we were doing, and also a little bit of technical safety. But to be honest, those first 7 years of my career, I think I was beautifully shielded from the real aspects of safety management. And 2001 was a wake-up call, because after a stint of being a process safety engineer, I was the executive assistant to the Shell UK chairman, and we were called in because a helicopter had ditched. 11 people died. And that moment just switched in terms of what's the real impact, because you meet some of the families, the concerned, following the incident. And 4 years later, by this time I was a plant manager in Bacton, which is in East Anglia, on the east coast of England, and again on Clipper, but Davy Soanes fell 6 meters through stair treads he was replacing. And he died from the impact from his head wound. But I was the closest manager to the scene, so I flew out with the coroner and the police. And when you're there with the operators, putting the bloody rags from where they tried to resuscitate him into a bag, it kind of, you never forget. So, in that same period, I was responsible for my little plant, Bacton. And the one thing that struck me there is that immediate sense of responsibility, and I think Ewan described that extremely well. You're responsible for all the guys on the team. Now, they'd had 7 years without an LTI, and in my tenure, I can't show Ewan's great performance because we did have 2 LTIs. So Jamie Marks and Clive Goose. And probably when I'm 76 and I retire, that's my prediction, that's the retirement age by the time that I retire, I don't think I'll remember any production target or any operating cost target that I ever had from that time. But I will remember visiting James and Clive at home. And then for my sins, I'll just take to the last one. I've now been a health and safety advisor in our joint venture countries. So first, actually, 2 countries, Russia, Kazakhstan, and more recently, 8 countries, of which Denmark is one. And sad to say that I've had 18 fatal incidents and 20 fatalities that I've been party to having to investigate or follow up or take the learning from. So are we at goal zero? We are very, very, very far from it. And we have a lot to do. And so on the one hand, I'm shaped by the tragedies, but for those of you who were here last year, they will have also heard Ben talk about the Pearl GTL experience, and Ben and I worked together for 5 years in Qatar. And so the other thing that shapes me, I think, is the inspiration that's derived from what is possible if you dedicate your leadership to safety. So this is what Shell aspires to. This is the intent. Yeah? Goal zero, no harm, and no leaks. And the no leaks was added, and I think it really is a good build on what Alex has talked about. Absolutely critical to our safety as well as our process safety. Yeah? So no leaks from our operations as a core. So despite the many, many fatal incidents, I truly hold the belief that we should be able to run our projects and run our operations in such a way that nobody gets seriously hurt. Yeah? It's a fundamental premise that we as an industry and we Shell as a company can choose to operate that way. Now, it's not easy, but I think if you look at the fantastic story that Mark Gallagher described, our industry has come a long way from where we were in the 1980s, that was described, and we've got a very, very long way to go still. Now, the people that we are exposing to risk is for 85% or more are our contractors, yeah? And not our Shell staff or our operational Maersk or other staff. And so really what we want to focus on is how do we work better in partnership, yeah, with our key contractors, subcontractors and suppliers overall to keep those people safe. Now, in its simplest form, Shell has been working on these 5 priority areas on safety. And so I'm taking away environment for a minute. So you see them: safety leadership, worksite hazard management, road safety, contractor agency, and asset integrity and process safety. But when you put it out in a line like that, it looks rather simple. Yeah? Safety leadership, yeah, we're going to talk more about that. It's really the start and end, yeah, of how you drive and ultimately achieve an outcome in the field, where you set an expectation, a vision as a leader, you declare where you want to be, and you move and inspire your team to that point. And in upstream, we are really working with, actually with the great support of J&J, but we're really stepping up in articulating both that future, but also in articulating both the team and the individual commitments to get us there. 3 of the areas are, yeah, kind of, we'll call it main hazard areas. Worksite hazard management are well known. Working at height, electrical safety, lifting and hoisting, and I'll name a few others. And asset integrity and process safety, I couldn't have had a better intro than Alex to describe what it takes. So designing and maintaining those multiple barriers to prevent the loss of hydrocarbon containment, prevent ignition, escalation, and ultimately also making sure you provide effective emergency response. Road safety may not be highly prevalent here in the offshore industry in the North Sea, but across the world, it is still the single biggest killer of people in our industry. You know, Shell alone drives about 1.3 billion kilometers per year, yeah, in its operations. And having safe vehicles, trained and competent and motivated and well-rested drivers, and having well-planned journeys are absolutely critical, yeah, to maintaining and allowing those people and their passengers to go home safely every day. And then there's this thing called Hse Management of Contractors. And I think sometimes it's a fallacy that we put it down as a line item or as an independent activity. So I would much rather articulate that as how do we harness the skills and the experience of both our companies, the operators, and our contractors and our subcontractors to really manage the 3 key hazard areas that we face. So I drew the picture slightly differently. Yeah? So on the left-hand side, we've got a lot of stuff. Yeah, and stuff is a great English word, but it's, what does that mean? Standards, procedures, tools, IT, training standards, competence standards, all of that. And really, you know, you might have seen it if you read the pre-interviews. For me, all that stuff is really condensing down 100 years plus of industry experience on what can go wrong. And I really think we should communicate more on it in that light. Yeah? And so for so many people, the procedure would seem to be a burden. But the more that we can communicate on it as actually all it is that condensed lesson learned from what's gone wrong in the past and what to do to prevent it, yeah? as a more positive element. But the thing is, we don't need more stuff. I can tell you Shell's got lots of stuff, I promise you. Yeah? Because it is built on so much knowledge and experience. And more we're seeing us looking to standardize and simplify across industry, and I'll talk a bit more on that. Yeah? And then on the right-hand side is really where the rubber hits the road. This is where we should focus. What is it with a fairly remote site? So I've got Bark PL, one of the little platforms I worked on with the Enduro next to it. Yeah? And the guys in the field, how is it that we get to translate all that wisdom, that experience, that knowledge, ultimately to the choices that are being made on the right-hand side, on the ground? And for me, that element called contractor agency management is very much about making that translation, taking that wealth of experience and getting it to enable the people on the ground to make the right decisions, for them to have the right skills and have the right experience. Now, there's a huge amount that we have to improve on the middle. We need to be more in the field. We need to listen more to our frontline supervisors. We need to build their capability more. We need to be able to articulate some of that wisdom more simply to the people on the right side. And so that challenge of both simplification and standardization is very much, I think, also a theme that you're hearing from the video this morning, that working together is about. But which way do you go? So, a major international operating company with operations, I think upstream operations in maybe 45 countries, will say, why don't we have a single incident reporting system for Shell and we can quickly share learnings across all those 45 countries? But our colleagues in Norway will say, let's have a single system for the Norwegian offshore sector, and we can quickly share between our guys there. And the guys in Holland say the same. So which one do you choose? I haven't got a simple answer on that one. Also, does the same process apply for the same company? I'll give you a small example. On road safety, we've got a kind of a pre-qualification questionnaire or a question list to assess major contractors. They simplified it down to 180 questions. Only in Shell can you simplify it down to 180, I promise you that. But 180 questions. Now, if you've got a 7-year major haulage contract that you're going to be running with a whole fleet of vehicles, that's not over the top. You want to dedicate that time up front to say, have I really got the right capable contractor? And do I know if there are gaps, what do I do to support the contractor to close those gaps before we start putting people at risk? But take that same rigor of tool, and I go into one of my other countries, Oman, and roughly half the vehicles that are running there are called OTOs, Omani truck owners. So because of local content development, you want to get more jobs to local people. You've got very, very small companies. I just imagine stepping in to a local rural village and saying, I've got 180 questions for you. That's not going to work. So we've got some huge challenges thinking, how do we really effectively get that stuff to the ground? And maybe a second example, I was recently in Egypt. There was a job working at height on a project, a warehouse construction. And we got some really experienced guys come over from the North Sea, the UK North Sea. So the permit, as you can imagine, with all the lessons from Piper Alpha, was immaculate. They'd identified the risks of working at height. They'd identified the risks of dropped objects from working at height on other people. The controls they identified exactly what was needed. But when you go out onto the site, they didn't have enough lanyards, so they had a couple of guys with and some without. And they hadn't really marked off the area where things could drop, and nor had they really said, these are the heaviest items that can drop and kill someone, and we're going to make sure that we're going to put some kind of fall arrestor or something on them. So the intent was there, the process was there, the knowledge of the risk was there, but it doesn't mean that without the right decision-making and quality of supervision on the site, that you actually have those identified controls implemented. And that's still one of our biggest challenges. So to help answer some of those questions, where do we go next with better working in partnership or working together with our contractors? We actually invited some feedback from 200 global contractor staff and also some of the Shell people working with them. Now, I'm not going to read them out verbally, so I'll let you read them, and I'll talk a little bit about some of the themes that we've got. So I put one positive comment in there, I hope you can spot it, because the rest of them, in honesty, were pretty stark and open, and I think it's, so I'm sharing them with quite a bit of humility as well. So the first one at the top is about we must engage better with the front line and listen more to both the contractors and the staff on the front line, to what their concerns are and what would really help them, and really enable them and develop their skills. And we talked about that earlier. The second one, if you've spotted it, is the more positive one. the contractors do respect there's good open dialogue and there is a clear commitment. Yeah? So that's a bit of positive feedback. But we need to continue with that dialogue. The third one is actually about, for those of us in the room who are in the HSE function, and I'm one of them now. Yeah? And the reputation we had gained was pretty awful to be more of a policeman, forever kind of pointing out who was wrong and saying it with a bit of a smug smile. That's the last thing you want to be, if you want to be. Our role is to inspire and cause the line to lead. Yeah, that's our role. So we need to be coaches, we need to be motivating, and we need to be enabling. That's our job. And we've got to really encourage the line to own it. There are too many places I see where they say, oh yeah, the permit to work system, that's run by our HSE folks. I said, how can that be? You've got to take the responsibility as the line. Our role is to enable them with a good system and to help them implement it effectively, but the responsibility has to be with the line. And the third one is the frustration around inconsistent standards, and I talked about it. So here's a person feeding back saying, I'd rather Shell had the same standard across the world, but some might say, I want to have the same standard across Denmark. Of course, the end solution is if you go to things like an OGP, it's fantastic where both contractors and operators around the world can align on some simple and consistent standards. And the final one, maybe really critical, is surprise, surprise, that Shell was seen to be a little bit elitist and possibly arrogant. And I've never heard that before from our colleagues in Denmark. Yeah? But we do need to listen more. So often, we employ a contractor who's got specialist knowledge, and then we look and try to tell them what to do. What a waste of effort, and what a duplication of effort. Yeah? And what does a real partnership look like? And I'll talk a little bit more about some experience that I had, which was actually quite positive. So what then do we do with all this feedback? Okay, so here in the photo, there are 3 people in the room who are on the photo, and I'll buy a coffee for anyone who can spot the 3 of them. Yeah? So I'm not one of them, by the way. So we invited 12 of our major global contractors to really engage with us openly about how is the partnership going. Yeah? And there was a real open and honest dialogue about both what's working well, but also the significant areas that we still have to improve, and really getting to the heart of the client-to-contractor relationship. Now, Alan talked a little bit earlier around a declared future, and this team of contractors and senior Shell contract sponsors, and interestingly, not necessarily the commercial holders of the contract. Yeah? So the conversation was between senior Shell leaders and senior contractor guys, but it wasn't, if you like, clouded by any key commercial discussions or issues that might have been going on. So this team declared a future. So they said, 0 harm and 0 leaks, achieved by managing our risks and utilizing the competent and empowered people across the companies contributing. They talked about we want to have a shared set of standards. We want to have standard solutions, simple and efficient ways of working, long-term partnerships between Shell and contractors, and mutual trust and honesty. And that's a fantastic future for us to be working in. Yeah? But then, what do we do to get there? And what I'll show next is a little bit some of the things we're working on the Shell side. So, on the left, the vision, and more deeply articulated in the declared future I just described. And on the right, some of the key strategies that we are looking to work on. It's got to be about implementation, and really not designing new stuff, but getting it on the ground. A key role is played in Shell by the contract holders. And too often we've got a contract holder would be a senior Shell manager, like an engineering manager, and he'd have too many contracts to manage, and effectively the contract would be just sat on the shelf, and it's not being used, and it's not being managed. So giving them the right training, the right capability, but also the right time and space. And the third one is a real, raising the bar and getting better on the contractor's own improvement steps and own improvement performance. And I think that's one of the big step changes. I was speaking to my Wells colleague, and he's been working very hard on dropped objects across our contractor partners and our well operations in all the 8 joint venture countries I govern. And he said, we can talk about the Shell standard or their own standard, and the differences are minor. I said, where I want to work is if we can simply help support the contractor meet his own standards, that's where the big game is. Let's not try to impose extra new stuff on. And that's the kind of thinking we want to work more on, is really for the contractors themselves to be clear on where they raise the bar. We approve that bar, but then we help the contractor meet their own standard. And we talk about contractor partnering. Now, you saw the level at the CEO level. We talked about the contractor holder level, which is another key partnership. But when I was a plant manager at Bacton, a major engineering and maintenance contract would be held above my level, but I had guys on the ground. So what did partnering mean to me when I was in that role? The local senior AMEC, this was AMEC guy on the Ricky Took, was simply part of my management team on site. So there would be 4 Shell guys and Ricky. And by making him part of the mind and management of the site, it was so much easier to identify issues. Now, I had probably every day there'd be 25 Shell guys on site, and probably 65 guys which worked for AMEC or AMEC subcontractors. So how could you possibly lead that site by not having him in the room in every discussion around what's happened on safety, where are the priorities for today, on maintenance or other things? You've got to really pull your contractor partner into the tent, into the way you're trying to drive the business. And then when you're looking at an AMEC monthly meeting, which is looking at how they were performing, you've also got open joint discussions around how's the maintenance team doing? Who's performing well? Who's ready for promotion? Because the insights that I and my team had was much greater than the senior AMEC guys would have had on their own guys. So again, you're working in partnership to help develop and nurture the guys. That, to me, is just a very simple, small example of what better partnering and better partnership can look like. And you'll be happy to know this is the last slide. Now, this is not the Danish offshore industry, but I like the picture. So this is a picture of a seismic crew. And actually, I don't even know whether it's Egypt, Jordan, or Saudi Arabia, or Oman. It could be any of those, in the Gulf desert countries that we operate and explore in. But it's a seismic crew, which I can probably say is a fair way away from the head office. And the guys are there on their own. But the picture I'd like to paste for you is that this, in my mind, is what I would call a family-sized unit. And I was enormously moved last year when Jim Trodden of Chevron talked about how, or 2 years ago, sorry, how he, as a senior OIM, treated all the people on his platform, whether they were staff or contractors, as part of his family. So what's this point about the family-sized unit? They don't get visited by the man in the grey suit from head office very often. You really rely on the quality of leadership and the quality of decision-making that you've put in that site. And it's probably the same size crew that you might have on a small platform, or that you might have in a work location working independently on one of your project sites. And they're probably all contractors. There might not even be a company rep. So what is it we're doing to make sure that all that knowledge, all that experience that we had on the left side, all the work we're looking to do in working better in partnership and working better at simplifying standards or getting the right rules ends up ultimately in a team like this one making the right call and making the right decision. And there's just 2 things that really struck me today. One is when Patrick talked about being 200 meters from the top and making the right call and saying, do you know what, we need to turn back. And Ewan talked about the only time his team really believed it on safety when he made a call. And I asked my Bacton crew when I left there, I said, what's the one thing you were most proud of? And they would say, Fons, it was that time where at the end of the shutdown, we were testing the sphere receiver at the end of the Le Mans line, and the Le Mans has got something like 1 BCF per day of production at the end of it. And there was a 30-year-old flange, hadn't been touched, but it wasn't holding tight. And I said, we're going to fix it. And that took an extra 4 days of shutdown. And the guys thought that I would find some kind of workaround or something to try and fudge it. And they were really pleasantly surprised. And I just thought, it just totally mirrors what Ewan said as well. But until you do something like that, safety is only, as a priority, is only talk. It only ever comes across when it's evidence. But that same Bacton crew was an absolute family-sized unit. Yeah? We had a great concept. It's called Bacton Core Crew. So everyone who was in that site, whether you're the cleaner, the guy who cuts the grass, the security guard, or me as plant manager and my operations lead, or the maintenance guys working on the plant, they were Bacton Core Crew. So Shell would celebrate something and say, Fons, we're going to send you 40 rucksacks because you've got 40 Shell staff. And I'd say, you can send me 100 or send me none. Because what you can't do is take a unit like that and be divisive inside. You've got to truly respect each and every one as a fully fledged member of the team. And that maybe is the punchline to think about. When we really talk about partnership, keep it on the ground, really think about how do you help a crew somewhere out on their own. Because real integrity and leadership is those things that you do when nobody is looking. Thanks very much.